Oh my god, what am I doing? Hi, welcome to Just Thinking Out Loud. My name is Desi-Rae. I wanted to make a quick video talking about the content of one's character because it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and Reverend Martin Luther King is famous worldwide for his focus on judging people by the content of their character and his I Have a Dream speech. I think that the United States, the country where Martin Luther King made his mark, is going backwards in this regard and will continue to do so until people start remembering those words the way that they were meant. The first thing I want to say though before getting into this is that Martin Luther King is a human being who was flawed just like everyone else. His words are an ideal, and I think that people pick and choose what they want from what someone said. I've heard the argument before that he was not actually for pacifism and nonviolence. And then of course I hear the other side of that. I don't think it matters. It's just like the Bible, where you can go and find what you're looking for and you can project onto someone what you want. People also change over time, so they maybe said more than one thing. The point, however, is that he became commemorated and idealized for a very specific thing, and that was on focusing on the content of one's character and not judging people by their race. With all due respect, society does not need Martin Luther King or looking to him to say that people should be judged by the content of their character. It's just that he embodies that for society, and as a hero, a national hero, that's an aspiration that society says, yes, this is something that we value and we care about. That being said, I think that society is going backwards in terms of judging people by race and character. Now, maybe I shouldn't say going backwards, because those things have always been an issue and people are tribalistic and they may choose to divide themselves along those lines. But in terms of keeping that ideal there, regardless of the fact that human nature doesn't change, I do think that the United States is going backwards. What are people being blinded by? I think collectivism and making people responsible for actions that aren't actually their own. So you're making the individual responsible for collective outcomes. I want to talk about group membership. Character and what we think of as character, so traits that someone might have, virtues such as, are they honest, are they truthful, are they kind, are they hardworking, are they accountable, do they have integrity? Those kinds of things, you can define virtues in different ways. Character that is formed by those virtues and people acting those virtues out in their daily lives should never be attached to group membership. Group membership should never be a shortcut or a heuristic to whether or not someone is actually embodying those virtues. And you can't know those things about someone through snapshots of them that you get through the news, for example. However, society has started making that commonplace, mostly through almost a manipulation of or desire to seek vengeance and to seek justice when we think that something has gone wrong. But if you're getting snapshots, then you're never actually seeing the entire picture. And if you're not specifically looking for counter arguments or other perspectives, you will never see them. In terms of race, it's pretty clear that if you just look at someone, you can't decide whether or not they are some specific thing that you might attach to that group. This goes for both people who maybe can say that 50% of crime in the United States is committed by 6% of the population that happens to be young black men. I still think, this is my opinion, that it is wrong to be potentially judging people based on things that they have never done. Likewise, I think that judging someone who is what the United States calls white or lighter skinned, very much lighter skinned, of European descent, blaming them for things that their ancestors did or assigning virtue, that should not happen, because that's making a shortcut that you don't actually know if the person who is in front of you possesses or does not possess certain virtues or vices that you may think they have. When it comes to politics, it's a little harder, but I still say that you should not decide that someone has some vice or virtue based off of their political affiliation. The reason I say this is that our interpretations of what other people think are usually far off. They're not actually what that person thinks. It's just the other side's interpretation of what that side thinks and wants. It tends to be in the extreme, especially in modern times in terms of social media. Also, the way that someone would ideally like to organize society is very different from the way that they treat people in their everyday lives. And I think that is where you actually see character playing out. Group membership should never be a shortcut. Now, I want to say, how do you reverse this polarization of society? I think the same way that it occurred, you just take steps backwards. Do the opposite. So, you can stop dividing people into groups and then analyzing situations only through those groups that you decided to divide people by. Acknowledge that other perspectives exist. Stop selective reporting. So just because some horrible thing happened to some member of some group by some member of some other group, well, if you only ever report it when it's in one direction, or when it's not in another direction, or when it's like not in either of those directions but from other people in other groups that aren't always the highlight, you can stop doing that, because that paints a brush that people filter the world through, that is the news, that is really a filter. That's all it is. Another thing is to not run from the truth. There are other statistics that might explain group outcomes. There are group differences that can explain outcomes differently from the ones that are generally seen, which is just usually some version of oppression. There are other ways to explain outcomes. So the truth is not just a slice of the truth. The truth is the whole thing. As human beings, we often don't know the whole thing, but we must always try to gather more and more and more and use the tools that we have developed in order to seek truth. So like science, for example, in order to try to get that big picture. And if you're only ever looking at a tiny bit, that's not the truth. That's what I had a literature teacher in high school. I remember her saying that there is no such thing as shades of honesty. It's either honesty or it's not. So you have to be looking at everything, or at least trying your best to. Another thing is to focus on what is common, and that is what I want to end with. We are all human beings. We should focus on our shared humanity, at least, and especially, as I always say, at the governmental level, at the level at which we organize society and decide how to do what is right and what is wrong. That doesn't mean that groups don't exist. That doesn't even mean that people might not try to do bad in terms of groups, or do good in terms of only wanting to help themselves, help a specific group out. However, the ideals that a nation, well, it's not just the US, it's nations around the world, should strive for, even when they're groups within society. And remember that what I brought up in this video, that being race and politics, people have killed over groups other than that. So none of this is limited to race and politics. What is something that is common that we have is our humanity, and each person is responsible for what they in particular do. So I just wanted to put my voice out there into the world and say my piece. That is all. If you like this content and you're new, subscribe. If you want to support my work, you can do so at justthinkingoutloud.tv/support. That way you can help to make my voice louder. If you want to hear this kind of perspective out there more versus a lot of the divisiveness that we're seeing today. In light of the censorship going on, you can sign up for my newsletter at justthinkingoutloud.tv/newsletter to keep in contact, and you can also listen to this in its podcast version. And we use whatever podcast app you like, justthinkingoutloud.tv/podcast. I hope that you have a good day, and although polarization in and of itself isn't a bad thing, sometimes it's good to part ways. I do think that something is being lost when focusing on seeing the humanity in other people is no longer an aspiration, particularly for places that have different groups within them. Bye!